Honourable Member for Bass.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I'll just continue with my contribution, which was about the impact of people in these circumstances, and just recapping, clearly, primarily, the impact is on farmers, on their well-being, on their reputation and on their trust of both the system that they present the livestock that they've raised on their properties with an expectation that they are dealt with appropriately on the way to both domestic, local, national and international markets. But the impact on the workers in the abattoirs, where, as it was said by the Australian Meat Industry Employees Association, that, a worker in one of these facilities without appropriate training is also under pressure. Whether it be the employees of the department that are required to conduct the investigations. Consideration needs to be made here as well on the human impact. And just prior to the break for lunch, I was also talking on the way that this is presented in the community, and I was expressing on behalf of someone that has had a conversation with me the disappointment that individuals are raised up and their individual brand and presence either in our community or nationally, in this instance the Australian of the Year from Tasmania, Stephanie Trethewey, how they have been picked out in this and associated. And it has an impact, a widespread impact on a lot of people. What I do want to do is go through systematically the motion that is before us, because I think it is comprehensive and it outlines a number of the key issues, the issues that have been raised with me by farmers and industry, by peak bodies and associated industries, the urgency and the absolute nature of the need for this never to happen again. And where we have had previous commitments that anything like this will ever happen again, we find ourselves in this situation. And before lunch I was saying that a lot of this comes down to the failure of this government over successive years and successive ministers to not uphold the regulations and the rules that they actually have in place. And if they did what they had already prescribed to happen, if those things actually happened, maybe we wouldn't find ourselves in this situation. And so, for instance, from one of the facilities that has been highlighted in the instances in recent days, no audit of their facility in the last 2 years. And that's just not good enough. It's not good enough to have rules to seek to protect reputations and processes, but then not actually have the priority application of resources in people and financially to actually go out and do the job that's required of you, because that puts at risk Tasmania's international brand reputation. We have farmers all across Tasmania are doing all the right things and investing in new processes and new ways of doing things on their land to ensure that our world-acclaimed, critically acclaimed produce grown here in Tasmania, raised here in Tasmania, is at the premium levels of the market. And if they're let down by one step in that process, then that actually undermines the entire primary industry sector in Tasmania. So the motion before us, the first part of the motion talks about condemning any animal cruelty in Tasmania, particularly in our slaughterhouses. And there have been calls right across Tasmania for this. And I think it's a universal, a unified voice in this parliament, in the community and in industry. And it talks about how these, the breaches of these standards is unacceptable, but also it identifies the failures in the regulation of the abattoirs. The motion also calls on the Minister to take immediate action. Now, I know that part of the actions outlined here require that there is a report back at the first sitting of the next parliamentary year in 2024, and I would hope that the actions of this Minister, of the department, of the people that work in this sector are done with absolute immediate urgency, and that report back publicly is provided multiple times along the process of the implementation of cameras and of other increased requirements, and that it is only the summary and the end point report back that happens in our first sitting week of Parliament. Because to wait till March, To wait any longer than as urgently as can happen is too long. We have people that are in action, processing right now, that need to be held to the highest of accounts. So I agree with the report back in the first week of the parliamentary sitting in 2024, but I expect that the minister doesn't wait until that time to report back on the implementation of the requirements from this motion. I agree Tasmanian Labor support the urgent audit of the welfare standards, but again, and there is in the motion a report back on the financials and the resources to do this work, but you can't wait till then to say, oh well, we're actually struggling to be able to resource it. The minister needs to make urgent action to ensure there are the resources to do these urgent audits, because that is required, and they are the expectations of farmers across Tasmania and of the community across Tasmania, and not just for the regular ongoing audits, but also for those unannounced, for the spot audits, for the surprise audits that actually go in and see what is happening when you're not expected. What are the actual all-day, everyday actions in these abattoirs across Tasmania? And I know that from the responses that have been provided, not just from the facilities that have had the illegal videos installed and the footage provided, but from all operators, that they are on notice and they know and have taken immediate action to already improve what they do. But as the owner of TQM said, you know, in his business he's saying one strike it, you're out. Well, for all Tasmanian operators, they're on notice. You know, one strike, one more wrong move, one more wrong fault, and you will not be welcome in the industry to continue to provide these services to Tasmanian farmers. So we need a report back of the evidence of the installation of these cameras, of the 24-hour video surveillance, either in the stun rooms or the slaughter rooms, or both the stun rooms and the slaughter rooms. And again, it's to provide evidence that it has happened, not that provide a report on the progress. There needs to be absolute expectation, absolute accountability and absolute urgency directed by this minister to ensure that that has all happened. And there's a commitment around the legislative changes. But as other people have mentioned, there are already strong provisions in place. Perhaps they can be improved, but it's about making sure that what is in place is actually committed to and maintained, and the audits happen across those as well. The other elements of this motion, in terms of the draft notice that was put on the suspension of the export licence, many other members have made contributions here, but the impact to the Tasmanian industry, impact on the animals, impact on the farmers of this facility being shut down would be catastrophic. It has been said that there isn't any alternative. I think there will, you could find in some situations some transport, some end market processing opportunities for some of the livestock to leave Tasmania, but there is no doubt that there would be bottlenecks. There is no doubt that given that this is the only export licensed facility in Tasmania for sheep and lamb and calves, that there's a range of different numbers being used, but as I understand it, by mid-January 50 to 60,000 sheep and lambs, and by the end of January maybe up to 120,000 sheep and lambs due already to be processed at that facility, that to suspend that licence prior to the outcome of the investigation doesn't condone the practices that we've seen on the video, but does talk to protect the sector in Tasmania, and that allowing them to continue but expecting and having multiple spot checks, regular checks, that any continued operation is done to the highest expectation of Tasmanians is essential. So Tasmanian Labor absolutely support the motion and thank the member, Mr Tucker, for bringing it forward. We recognise that the impact that has already occurred over many years of this government not being able to uphold its responsibilities and the expectations of Tasmanians to maintain what already exists in terms of regulation has been a letdown, and Tasmanian farmers and the Tasmanian community have been let down by this government. And moving now to see that these instances are still happening means that there is a failure in the system, and that's not good enough, and it doesn't meet anyone's expectations. The TFGA have been very clear about not slowing down the process of improvements by waiting for legislative changes, and they are talking about the support of this place, of Parliament, of government, of farmers, but also of industry, to implement an industry code of conduct. And in that, many of these points have been picked up by the motion of Mr Tucker, but they believe that an industry code of conduct mandating cameras in the areas, which is part of the motion here, having the surprise on-site snap audits, ensuring absolute and comprehensive paper trails across all of the processes, which allows that international reputation, that brand reputation of Tasmania and the reputation of the individual farmers to be maintained. And really importantly, the ongoing and more education and training for staff. There might be procedures around induction and training, but they have to be continually provided to ensure that there are no exceptions in the processing line where any of these devastating and cruel incidents happen in livestock in Tasmania. And so TFGA is seeking for immediate best practice to occur here in Tasmania that meets the expectations of the world. And also to ensure that not only do we install cameras, that they're running 24/7, but there's resources and capacity to actually review it and look at it and then take action. And I think that is where this all comes back to, that it's all very well and good to have the regulations, it's all very well and good to have the cameras, but they need to be audited, they need to be reviewed, and then if there are any incidences ever again, strong action without hesitation needs to be taken. And of course, this is not an isolated challenge for Tasmania in terms of what's happening in our abattoirs, because it's something that's adding another layer of pressure to our farmers right now. Just the most recent red meat update talks about the pressures for farmers at the moment, and just the topics that they're going to cover at their up and coming Red Meat Update Day talks about an update on the market, the challenges around interest rates and what the market analysis is. It talks about budgeting out your feed and prioritising water. It talks about all of the things that are challenging right now, checking out the marginal cost and benefit analysis and looking at financial impacts of the current circumstances. There's no doubt that farmers in Tasmania at the moment are under pressure. They have high expectations for the great work that they do, that they're not let down anywhere in the process. Whether it be a worker on the floor, whether it be an owner, whether it be a member in the department, whether it be the minister, whether it be a peak body, whether it be a person in the community, Tasmanians are united in their expectations that there is never any animal cruelty undertaken in Tasmanian abattoirs, and it's the government's responsibility, it's our collective responsibility here in Parliament to back in this motion to support farmers and workers in their efforts. And I do just want to say in closing that it's easy to make cheap shots about things in this place, and it's easy to misrepresent small circumstances to maybe try and make a good story. But when the Greens say that this place refused to implement cameras in terms of protecting animal welfare, the Greens know absolutely that what happened the last time the Animal Welfare Act came to the Tasmanian Parliament, that there was a collective agreement that in order not to risk removing pronged collars from the Tasmanian community, that it wasn't to be amended or opened up further, so that absolutely outstanding issue in Tasmania Tasmania was dealt with once and for all. And there was an understanding of what that meant. And there was an understanding that this government would do the work to ensure that any further ongoing animal welfare issues would be considered in a future opening up of the Act. There are already significant regulations and rules in place that cover abattoirs in Tasmania. It is up to the operators, the workers and the regulators, the people that do the audits, to ensure that they are maintained, to protect the reputations and to protect the well-being of both livestock and farmers in Tasmania, and our incredible reputation locally, nationally and internationally, and to ensure that what has been disclosed in the videos never ever happens in Tasmania again.